Landman season May 2nd be officially heading off the rails, and not in the bold, chaotic way that sometimes reinvents a show, but in a quieter, more troubling way that suggests the series is losing control of its own story. What started the season with clear momentum, sharp tension, and a focused power struggle is now beginning to feel scattered, unfocused, and increasingly unsure of what its main conflict actually is. The warning signs have been building for a few episodes now, and they're getting harder to ignore. At the beginning of Season 2, Landman knew exactly what it wanted to be about. Tex was in trouble. Tommy was stretched beyond his limits. Galeno represented a dangerous kind of salvation. Cammy was drifting away from Tommy's judgment. Every storyline, whether personal or professional, fed into that central crisis. Even when the show slowed down, it never lost direction. The tension was intentional. The pressure was constant. And every episode felt like it was pushing towards something inevitable. That sense of inevitability is what's starting to slip. One of the biggest problems right now is that the show keeps introducing stakes without following through on them. The offshore rig was framed as a turning point, a massive financial and ethical gamble that could either save Tex or destroy it. Instead of becoming the season's backbone, it's been treated more like a recurring reminder than an active crisis. We're told it's dangerous. We're told it's expensive. But we're rarely shown the consequences in a way that fundamentally changes the story from one episode to the next. When the biggest risk in the show starts to feel abstract, everything else starts to feel smaller by comparison. Tommy's arc is another area where the show is starting to spin its wheels. His struggle to be both Tex's president and its landman was compelling early on because it felt unsustainable. Every decision chipped away at him. Every compromise raised the stakes. Lately, though, his stress feels repetitive rather than escalating. He's still overwhelmed. He's still defensive. He's still making questionable calls. But the story isn't pushing him into new territory. It's circling the same ground. That repetition dulls the impact. Instead of feeling like a man racing toward collapse, Tommy starts to feel stuck in narrative limbo. Cammy's storyline suffers from a similar lack of forward motion. Her decision to side with Galeno should be explosive. It's a betrayal of trust, a power shift, and a direct threat to Tommy's authority. But instead of forcing that conflict into the open, the show keeps it hovering in the background. Cammy exists in a constant state of justification without reckoning. She's neither fully committed to Galeno nor openly confronting what her choices mean for Tex. That ambiguity might be intentional, but without progression, it starts to feel like avoidance rather than complexity. Galeno himself is becoming less effective as a looming threat. Early in the season, his presence was felt even when he wasn't on screen. Every deal, every delay, every compromise seemed to trace back to him. Now, his influence feels more implied than demonstrated. A power player who doesn't actively change the board eventually stops feeling dangerous. The show keeps telling us Galeno is the only thing keeping Tex alive, but it hasn't consistently shown what that dependency actually costs in real time. Another sign that Landman may be drifting is how its personal subplots are starting to overwhelm the central narrative instead of reinforcing it. These character moments aren't bad on their own. Many of them are well-written and well-acted, but they increasingly feel disconnected from the main story. Instead of sharpening the pressure around Tex, they diffuse it. The result is an episode structure that feels busy without feeling urgent. Pacing becomes a casualty of this drift. Episodes are full of conversations, conflicts, and emotional beats, yet very little feels resolved or meaningfully advanced. Things happen, but they don't land. Tension flares and then recedes. Decisions are teased but postponed. That rhythm creates the unsettling sense that the show is stalling when it should be accelerating. What makes this especially frustrating is that Landman still has all the raw ingredients of a great season. The performances remain strong. The dialogue still carries bite. The world still feels grounded and lived in. But those strengths can't compensate for a lack of narrative direction forever. At some point, complexity turns into clutter and subtlety turns into hesitation. When people say a show is going off the rails, they don't always mean it's getting worse in obvious ways. Sometimes it means the story has lost its internal compass. The characters are still moving, but they're no longer moving towards something clear. The stakes are still high, but the consequences are delayed or diluted. The audience is asked to stay invested without being rewarded with progression. Ironically, this mirrors MTech's itself. The company is overextended, pulled in too many directions, and operating without clear leadership. That parallel might be intentional, but intention doesn't replace payoff. A show about pressure and precision can't afford to feel unfocused without undermining its own themes. Season 2 isn't beyond saving, not yet. But the margin for error is shrinking. If the offshore rig doesn't become a real, unavoidable crisis soon, if Galeno doesn't assert tangible control, and if Tommy isn't forced into irreversible decisions, the season risks collapsing under the weight of its own setup. Landman doesn't need more storylines. It needs commitment to consequences, to escalation, and to the central conflict it worked so hard to build. Because once a show loses focus, even the strongest characters can't keep it on track. And right now, Season 2 is dangerously close to proving that.